Long ago in the west of France, so they tell me, there lived Tip and Toe. Now they were mischievous twins, not wicked, no. They just saw the world as a stage, couldn't resist playing tricks. Some people are just fun-loving by nature, imaginative, curious, even daring and such. Well, they wouldn't marry, wouldn't settle, hardly ever did anything that smelled of responsibility without being told to. Theirs was the tiny village of File-de-Loup, which was the old language, meant something like wolf nets. It was named for a special type of net, thick, wiry, woven by brawny, solemn and courageous men who mercifully caught wild wolves, carried them back to the forests from which they came, if only to keep danger from turning into disaster. But disaster struck the village anyway. No, not by the fangs of wolves, but by a wine-blinding tragedy when danger was served through a kindness delivered to the sheep's grazing field. And from that day the boredom started to grow teeth. You see, the villagers made sure they always had wine ready for all feast days, especially Mardi Gras, which was sanctioned by the rhythm of the liturgical calendar, by the way. It was a strong tradition, and it was a bit of excitement, so the Mardi Gras wine was practically a requirement. Yes, I've heard that the French were deathly serious about their wine. Now, right about midwinter one year, a problem came to the attention of the villagers after the priest, the official winemaker there, had suffered from a bout of winter fever for a good month or so. Turned out that the sparkling festival wine that he usually had, fermenting away by then, wouldn't be ready until several weeks after Fat Tuesday. Well, the two officials of Little File-de-Loup planned to cancel Mardi Gras in light of this, and so began the real trouble. The villagers wouldn't dare have the Lenten season without the Mardi Gras, so asked an old shepherd who'd once been a winemaker's apprentice to make the wine. But he was too old to press the grapes and all of that. Still, he generously told them how he'd done it so long before. So one of them wrote the instructions down, though in quite poor penmanship. Then they hurried up and started the wine-making themselves. Those 9 villagers made more than enough of the wine and fermented it, then determined it to be ready 2 weeks before the Mardi Gras festival would begin. So glad and hospitable as they always were in France, especially regarding any wine, they kindly and abundantly gifted some of their wine to the old sheep herder, leaving it among the sheep for him. Well, that good old shepherd shared it with the other 3 good old shepherds out among the flock. But alas, the wine was bad, very bad, oh, very bad indeed. The old shepherds drank it, though. It was in a little wooden tub that sat on the ground, so a few sheep got to it. Blinded by that batch of wine, they went wild, running for the cliff. The shepherds, blinded as well, went tumbling with the sheep from the cliff. There was sadness and silence across the village for a month, and no Mardi Gras that year either. After that, all wine was banned for 12 months because the chief elder wanted to teach his people a serious lesson. But without the wine, the festivals stopped. Without festivals, village cheer soured. Without cheer, purpose and satisfaction dwindled. The whole village grew too depressed to do anything but work, work, work. That's when Tip and her brother, Toe, grew extra bored, extra mischievous, and so restless that the 2 of them began to stir once again. But someone noticed their energy, so put it to good use. In the town court where the fruit trees grew, the village elder said to the twins, "You 2, we need you to replace your 4 blind uncles. No one else can make time to keep the job. So go pack a lunch, no wine, of course, and head on out to the meadow." "For how long?" Tip asked. "All day, every day. We have the night shift covered by the priest and the bishop. The job is simple. You'll keep the wolves away, but you won't be alone, for if ever you come calling out, 'Help! A wolf has come to consume the sheep,' then everyone in the village will hurry to the rescue, carrying pitchforks and spades to protect the netters, who'll capture the wolves like they always do. That's the only time you're allowed to cry wolf, though. Understand?" Tip asked, "But what if a wolf tries to bite my eyes?" The elder was a cynical old one, so he said, "Then bite his eyes back." While she glared hard at him and his senseless answer, he handed her and her brother each a sheep-herding staff, then went whistling back to his simple log throne to sip on more of his suspicious-smelling grape juice. Well, the pair went out to watch the sheep. For the first 3 months they made the days go by quicker by playing silly childish games like chase and hide-and-seek, and one they'd made up involving a rock hunt. But they often argued over how the rock hunt should go, since they kept rewriting its rules daily in another one of their latest, unwritten and half-invented languages. So they usually forgot what the words meant overnight, which wasn't helpful, of course. Tip and her brother Toe soon tired of those boring kiddie games. So Tip said to Toe, "Want to have some real fun?" Tip never tired of chasing a thrill, whether it was childish or not. She was the brains of the pair, you might say, sort of like Eve, if Eve had a younger brother and a knack for mischief instead of apples. Toe said, "Your games bore me half to death. What do you have in mind now? Another dumb grass-eating contest?" Oh yes, they had competed against the sheep, lost miserably. "No," Tip said, "I have a much better idea this time." Toe interrupted her. "I have an idea myself. I thought we could get some bows and arrows. Go wolf hunting." Tip said to her brother, "No, Toe. First of all, it's a sin to kill a wolf for fun. Besides, I'm scared of wolves." "Come on," he mused. "Would surely beat eating grass among the sheep. All you'd have to do is run. Like bait, I'll shoot the arrows." She thought about that a moment, frowning, then smiled as she thought a second thought and said, "Oh, I know what, Toe. Instead of making me run scared from wolves for your hunting amusement, we could make everyone else run from wolves for both of our amusement. Could you imagine the excitement? Oh, it would be a harmless little game." "But," Toe said, "how do you plan to play that game? There's no one out here but you and me. So," she smiled, "let's bring the excitement to them." Then she proceeded to explain how this would work, and that night they tiptoed right over to the hut next door to steal a peculiar item from their aunt Cellar. She stored aged rubbish there, you see, that she just couldn't part with. Others in the village secretly called that cellar the death hole of stiffened horrors, because what the aunt stored there were numerous gruesome artifacts passed down through generations to her from her numerous gruesome ancestors. I'm sure they were nice people, though. One may be both, nice and gruesome at the same time, it seems. Well, anyway, the death hole of stiffened horrors held petrified old tools with long rusted blades, a few large wooden spoons, and even a wheel of blue cheese, which had all absolutely turned to stone. There were bearskin rugs that had turned hard as oak, and skillfully stiffened, stuffed old creatures, to include a little lamb, a few innocent mice, and many, many large wolves that had once roamed the world with the taste of villager still on their palates. Tip whispered over her candle. "Remember when that wolf almost got us in our cradle?" "No, I was asleep. You were still awake," he said. "Well, even since then I've dreamed of taking one of these stuffed wolves and turning it into a disguise so I could prowl among the wolves as one of them and dare them to ever come near me again." I doubt that would work out well for you, Toe whispered. So they captured themselves a stuffed wolf and snuck away with it to the stables, where they stayed up all night cutting and sewing, reconfiguring that large stuffed wolf into a costume with a tailored fit. At daylight they promptly bagged it up, brought it with them on their 5-minute walk to relieve the priest and the bishop at 7 a.m. sharp. Then Toe went into the bushes, which were half goat-eaten, but they'd do the job well enough, hiding him in the shadows as he transformed his shiny little mischievous face into one so dark and sinister that even the fattest sheep trembled and ran. Only that fat sheep saw him, luckily, or there'd have been a scrambling of the sheep that lasted all day. Out of those chewed-up bushes came a towering figure, a beast of reddish black, a sight which made his sister giggle and snort as he lowered to all fours, being exactly the size and shape of a wolf, and the exact same vocal pitch and tone too, having practiced the perfect snarling growl all night. She laughed and laughed. "Oh, can you see me through those wolf eyes?" "Yes," he growled. "Oh, you sound too real," she said, "and you look too real, and you even smell too real." Chicken blood from Aunt Gristle's kitchen. I thought it could be a nice touch if I smelled real too. He'd smudged up the insides of his shoes with it. Their aunt, you see, earned a penny a dozen, and a hen besides, for draining and skinning the neighbours' birds. So Toe must have smelled like he'd just come from devouring the runt of some feathered flock. That would certainly raise concern in the great nostrils of anyone who knew what a frustrated, hungry wolf smelled like. Tip said, "Now I'll run that away to the north, and you come growling after me. But when we're done there, you must hurry and vanish before anyone can get on your tail with a wire net, and hope old Bobbles doesn't come out with his pitchfork." Inside his wolf head he smiled. "Oh, they'll never ever catch me." So off they went, leaving the sheep grazing and unattended. Those sheep could have jumped the meadow's knee-high stone wall and wandered off, but they didn't, because they weren't in any discomfort. The winds were low, the air was nice, there was plenty to eat and drink, and the most recent wolf to terrorize the flock had been captured the prior week, so there was nothing to chase them round or cause them to scatter. The same, though, could not be said for the unsuspecting villagers. At mid-morning they were all outside their huts and shops in the centre of town. The blacksmith was clanging, the water girls were dipping their buckets into the stone well, the baker was slicing, the candlemaker was dipping the wicks and hanging the candles to dry, the cloth spinner was spinning linen, and the farmers were at the west end of the road working the earth with spades, sickles, and a rusty old iron rake. A few whistled while they worked, for that is no myth, you see. Many a villager used to actually do things like that, to make the work-day pass more pleasantly and quickly, and to scare away the snakes. Though all the whistling, humming, chopping, dipping, scurrying, sloshing, gossiping, splashing, spinning, whizzing, barking and banging couldn't mask the sound of Tip's piercing outcry. "Oh, a wolf is after me! Help, please help!" She was on the south edge of the road's west end, having already run from the south thicket into the street, then back towards the tree line. Toe chased her right into the thicket, growling like some enchanted beast with a human voice. He sounded womanly, for you see, he was laughing beneath his every growl. So one of the farmers who'd seen this cried out, pointing, "Look, we must hurry! That wolf's enchanted by a witch. It'll eat everything, unmake creation with its very fangs." Now when the villagers heard this, the blacksmith dropped his hammer. The baker froze mid-slice. The cloth spinner's wheel slowed to a halt. Then came the cry, "Let's kill that creation-eating wolf." They, with tools and chains, rattled along over the thumping of their boots. There were probably around 50 or so. Sounded like a stampede of escaped killer bulls, they say. The little dogs from the east end of the road joined the mob, and the mothers all went out along the road, stood there holding their toddlers, screaming out, "Get 'em! Get that wolf! Save us all!" Well, once the mob entered the south thicket, Tip emerged once again from the tree line, though farther to the east, halfway down the road, and now the wolf was running after her, right near the mothers who held tight to their toddlers. The apparent big reddish-black wolf galloped after her as she changed direction to vanish back into the trees again. I've given this some thought, yes, and have carefully concluded that if I had been so afraid of wolves in those days, I don't think I'd have lived near any thickets. But to each his own. Now the mothers were hysterical, screaming, bawling even, and one trembled so much that she couldn't keep her grip on her excited toddler, who leapt down and ran off laughing to see the great wolf. Well, at least that one little giggler got the whole joke. So clattering and hollering, the mob came from the west end of the road, going eastward before they took a sharp right, quickly vanishing into the south trees, just as Tip, who'd gone another 40 yards east within the thicket, emerged again. And now she was near the butcher's place, the cloth shop, the coffee beanery, and the church, leaving a gap of a great many meters between her and the clumsy mob. This was what you might call downtown. Right behind her was her fool brother, galloping like a horse in that get-up of his. The priests came outside to watch, for you see one of them was an aspiring tanner of hides, and simply embraced any opportunity to get his hands on a wolf's skin. He'd rarely ever had the chance to tan a wolf's hide, though, because none of the wolves the villagers ever caught were actually bold enough to prowl downtown. Most wolves are smarter than that. They tend not to enter a bustling human village, especially not alone. Well, the wolf pursued Tip as she ran past the line of shaded stone benches not far from the priest, who stood in the northwest shade of that tall church with his slingshot, aiming a tough little unripe kumquat right at the wolf. "Oh, run for your lives! We'll all be devoured!" Tip cried out. And now that tanner priest lowered his slingshot slowly, his jaw agape, as he leaned over toward his fellow priest to say, "You see that? Yes, let's go inside. The mob's coming from the thicket now and will be trampled." Though the tanner priest shook his head slowly. "But that's no normal wolf. I can't tell what it is, but it gallops like a horse, has the shoes of a man, the knees of a monkey, and the growl of a little girl." "Oh!" the other priest screamed when he heard that description of the wolf, running inside and shouting something about Lucifer being loosed and Judgment Day. And now faint screams emerged from inside the cathedral, while someone inexperienced ran up the stairwell and gonged the bell once or twice, but slipped, rolled, and collapsed with a thump and a grunt on the landing. The screaming went on in there as the meek and hungry little nuns started shuttering all the church windows closed. But the baffled priest only took a few steps back to let the mob go by, as Tip circled back around the stone benches and shot straight into the south woods. But Toe had no way to go but north over the church grounds. The whole village was turned upside down. Well, not literally, but there was hysterical screaming through the streets, plus the howling mob, plus a few maddened toddlers taking advantage of the situation by climbing up the low stone wall around that awfully deep well. Tip, whose grinning was concealed by the thicket, saw this and gasped, saying to herself, "No, this isn't fun anymore. I have to get Toe out of here." She hurried to the tree line to watch for her brother to come running back. Right about then, an unattended soap-maker's iron cauldron, which was full of animal fat, boiled over but 100 feet from the well, and now disaster struck. The whole mess erupted into a village fire as the mob, who were as terrified as if this had been an actual wartime scene, simply lost their minds and all began to attack the wolf at once, just meters north of the church's stone benches. Even from the bell tower, they say, you couldn't have picked out the wolf from among them all as they mounded atop it. And in all the chaos, as they beat it with chains and spikes and battle axes, pitchforks and spades, and even that rusted rake, old Toe had made his way to the west shade of the church, oblivious to the fire, because the mob was the most intense thing 15 meters from his earshot. And there he stood, arms crossed, laughing to himself, watching the mob slaughter his costume. They left it pulverized on the grass, then all went running toward the well to put out the fire, never noticing anyone hidden in the shade there, as Toe never noticed any silent priests behind him. While the mothers screamed on, a dozen from the mob went westward and crossed the growing flames, then swiped the babies off the well and ran them to safety, while the rest of the villagers formed a line with buckets and started the chore of putting the fire out. Tip hurried over to Toe, who wore his regular clothes but was still in his rugged shoes, and they watched what was happening more closely. "Oh, you and I, brother, have really caused a commotion." Toe, who wasn't laughing anymore, just stared at the disaster in his village. Then he said, "Tip, we're like criminals now. Just look at what we've done." So the tanner priest, who stood hardly 8 meters away and had been watching what nearly no one else saw, whispered into the ear of the other priest, pointing at the shoes of Toe, and now they both knew who'd been inside that enchanted wolf. Well, Tip and Toe were frightened half to death over the thought of getting caught, so both vanished through the thickets and returned to their post. Among the sheep and beneath a willow tree stood Toe and Tip. "We have done a terrible thing," Toe said to his sister. Tip wiped her tears. "You could have been slaughtered like a wild animal." "Yes, but I'm all right. Please don't cry," he said, stepping over to comfort his sister. She backed away. "It's all my fault." "No," said Toe. "I went along with it. I'm the one who wore the wolf skin." "What shall we do now?" she asked. "Nothing. Don't say anything. Just let it alone. I think we've learned our lesson," her brother said. And as they uttered those words, the tanner priest and the other priest stepped up behind them, with the tanner priest softly asking, "Have ye?" Startled, the twins turned, and each said, "Yes, Father Elm, we have. We truly have." So they all sat on logs beneath the tree for a few moments and discussed the whole matter. Father Elm asked, "Are you very well aware, young man, that children almost died?" "Yes," he said, "and I know that the village almost burned down, and that everyone has been shaken to the core over our foolish prank. And," said his sister, "Toe almost got killed in the worst way. It's as if we brought out the worst in everyone, nay, worse than the worst. Now we'll both be loathed by everyone." "Tell me," the father asked, "why did you two do it?" Ashamed, they hung their heads and whispered, "Boredom. They banned the wine, and without the wine they've quit having the festivals, and without the festivals there is no music or any dancing, and people are all depressed now, and boring." Oh, every shade of Tip, from the silly to the soul, was in tears, as sincere as could be. She said, "We wanted to have a good time, to feel good again, I suppose. You must hate us now." Father Elm said, "No, my dears, I don't hate you at all. I'm worried about you both. And I'm worried about the village finding out that you two caused all this. That's why I've swept up the shredded costume so no one will find it." "Why spare us?" she asked, wide-eyed. "Because what happened today was an absolute village nightmare. As long as they think it was some beast that's been shredded into oblivion rather than you two, who caused the whole horrid outbreak, they'll forget it soon enough and heal and soon even celebrate their victory. But if, after all that, they discover that it was you two, then they won't be able to forget it so soon, not with seeing your faces day in and day out. That's just how delicate people are. These things aren't easy, you see. Instead of celebrating victory, the village might just quietly suffer in the soul and in the mind for months, perhaps even years to come. There could be distrust and grudges, none of it necessary or meaningful. I don't want to see our lovely village fall apart like that. I don't want you two to be branded for life. I used to be young once. I know how it is to do something foolish and risky that you wholeheartedly regret." After a moment of silence, Tip was still baffled and asked, "So we won't be punished at all?" Father Elm sat taller and said, "For what? To keep you from doing it again? No, not needed. You'll never do that again or anything remotely like it. Firstly, because you both feel so very bad, and secondly, because I saw everything, and if such a prank were to cause this kind of disturbance in our village again, well, I'd then be compelled by my conscience to reveal my secret. But since you're truly sorry, I'm sure I'll take my secret with me to the grave." "Amen," said the other priest. "If he does, then I will too." And now the mob came through the field to deliver the news of the catastrophe to Tip and Toe. As they approached, someone yelled out, "You see, everyone! It's like I said, the gal's terrified of wolves, so she came back to the safety of her brother, and they're both just fine." Father Elm said to the mob, "We've discussed it, and look at them. They're simply all broken up about that wolf and the fire and everything that happened." The leader of the mob spoke, saying, "I'm sorry, you two, but your hut is half burned. No one was killed, but your family will have to sleep all in one room until we help to rebuild the hut right." Then he wiped a dot of blood from his cheek and looked at it, saying, "Yep, we slaughtered the beast, whatever it was, and we pulverized it well into the dirt, because there was nothing left to him when we went back after dousing out the flames. Nothing, except a lot of very, very smelly old blood. It smelled like a corpse round there, so maybe it was a hellhound we got. But whatever the case, we'll all be safe now." They say it was Father Elm who, after sweeping the wolf hide up, left a puddle of chicken blood there to satisfy the poor villagers. Tip and Toe and the father just glanced at one another as the mob dispersed in mumbles. Thank goodness no one was hurt over a frightful thrill. They say that a month later the priests started making the wine again, for the restriction was lifted early, and the village soon had a happy old festival called the Victory Over the Enchanted Wolf Festival. They ran it like some sort of off-season Mardi Gras, with the green and gold, but a deep orange instead of the usual purple, to symbolize the melting away of old fears that brought renewed sharing between all those in the countryside. To them, you see, deep orange was the lovely warm color of shared bread and fruit, ale and honey, by the cheer of bright candle flames. And I hear that they all had a very merry time all 3 days of it, and the aunt never knew a stuffed wolf was missing, since she never could remember whether she had a dozen or a baker's dozen of them. Well, they say that from then on the whole village slept well, believing a hellhound had come and gone. And the priest, who knew better, let the peace of late evening do its work, like fresh linen drawn up over sleeping shoulders or something like that. And he secretly kept a surviving piece of that aged wolf hide. Legend has it that he stitched it on as the backing of a hand mirror he fashioned, and that he usually looked into it once each year in October, on St. Francis Day, I believe, the first one, not the second one. From then on, he grew quite fond of saying that when the beasts of old don't stay stuffed, it's best to sweep up and discard most of the fright, as long as the leftovers get attached to some mirror somewhere. Some claim that his mirror ended up tucked away in that very same cellar from which the wolf hide came, though no one's ever found it or half of what was in that cellar, most likely because it was robbed a century later. And I'd imagine that any rugged old cellar thieves would appreciate a good mirror to help them clean themselves up, get a good shave before meeting with their unsuspecting buyers. Well, good night, folks.